Kia ora koutou. Did my name come up? No. So my name's Tjalling de Vries, as you just heard, and it's a tricky one because I was born in the Netherlands, but I came out here quite young and grew up on the peninsula. As Lyndon said, and as is really clear, and I just keep thinking how there's almost no simple way to say this is the way to this career. It's pretty much, I think, the main thing from what I gather is it's passion that drives you to where you are. And I definitely didn't think I'd end up being an exhibitions designer, 20 years ago. I actually studied at university here. I studied fine arts, and I wanted to be an artist. I was one of these lucky people that had two parents as artists, and it was a very normal thing for me to do, is become an artist. But of course, alongside that, you can't just suddenly become an artist who makes a bunch of money, and that's what you're doing. So I developed a whole lot of skills straight away at university. One of those simple things was working at what was called SOFA Gallery, the School of Fine Arts Gallery in the Arts Centre. That's why I have this slide here. And I'll try and race through instead of waffling on, which was a really good initial step. And I was, at the same time, when I was still at art school, I also picked up some casual work at the Art Gallery, Te Puna or Waifetu. I was digitizing the works on paper collection, and so that was actually crazy. Like, it's a long time ago. That was my foot in the door for where I am now. I went overseas for a bit after I did my honours degree in printmaking. And I actually did a year working for the Architectural Institute in London as just looking after their buildings and things like that. And I think it's just because being an artist, I kept finding myself looking for roles in the arts and that sort of heritage sector. Run through these slides. I came back here and I did my master's in painting. And I worked for Andrew Drummond, who's a sculptor here in the city, for 5 years, and gained a lot of skills with him, a lot of practical skills mainly, and also sort of project management skills, because and many of you may know his work, but he's a sculptor with huge... This is an example of the kind of things that he'd make. So there, as well as practical skills, there was a lot of managing the projects that were often took a few years to make. And then during this time, I was always doing a little bit of casual work at the art gallery. We always have casuals, and that is a great way to get your foot in the door at the art gallery, is to do casual work, installing exhibitions and things like that. And I was lucky enough to then, after I worked for Andrew, I got a full-time role as a technician at the art gallery. And I was also lucky enough that while I was a technician, I got a few opportunities to actually design exhibitions. One of those exhibitions was with Dane Mitchell. He was one of New Zealand's representatives in the Venice Biennale, and we brought that exhibition to Christchurch. You might remember a few years ago there were a bunch of trees around the city that were talking to you. That was part of this exhibition, and it was really nice to design this show. This is an anechoic chamber that you're looking at, and there was a sort of a library space with a printer, and so my role was to think about the way that we could show the work that he made in our gallery spaces. And so you're generally working with either the artist and a curator, or just with the curator. If it's historic shows, you work with curators, obviously. These are some of my colleagues. Jamie is an exhibitions designer as well. 3 or 4 years I've been working as an exhibitions designer now, and it's a really, really varied role. It's fantastic. I have a terrible thing that I say, but I'd say it, which is if I have to have a job, this is the perfect one. And what I really mean with that is I've also got a career alongside that as an artist, and I don't really see that as a job, but this is, it's so varied. It's fantastic, but how you get there is just this sort of, I think it's that thing I said about following your nose and passion. This is a Francis Hugh Pritchard artwork, which was pretty cool. You guys might have seen that. That was originally made in rubber, and then it was cast in Italy in bronze. And so the technical kind of problems of having to mount that on a stone with a team, and that's one side of my role, is that kind of quite practical, hands-on kind of work. And then the other side of it is we had an exhibition a couple of years ago that we did together with the museum called Ship Nails and Tail Feathers. And so what we do with every exhibition is we design how that will look beforehand in 3D. So simply put, there's a plan of the kind of concept before we even install it. And then in 3D, you kind of can present to the curators and artists, depending what you're doing, what it will look like. I work in the exhibitions and collections team at the art gallery, which means I work with conservators, registration, photography, a librarian, the technicians, obviously, and a designer. And all these people, we're sort of the people doing the things that you can see when you walk into the art gallery, into the spaces. That's about it. Ask me questions afterwards. Thanks.